Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu an la
قال الله تعالى في القرآن الكريم يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير. So as Muslims we believe that we come from Allah and that Allah is one. And when the first human was created, it was created from the Spirit of Allah. Where Allah says, وَنَفَّسَ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِنَا, and we blew our spirit into him. And that which brought him and his partner to life. And out of that sexual union between the two, he scattered humans in the billions. And he created all sorts of diversity that can be noted in creation of humans alone. And each human, although belonging to a different race or ethnicity or culture or tradition, is unique within himself and has diversity within himself. And there is a divine plan with all of this diversity. So instead of religion celebrating this diversity as divine purpose, they seek to control it and to subdue it to conform to a certain way of thinking. Orthodox Islam, for example, is not free from blame in this regard. This diversity that Allah created is full of color and full of difference in language, culture, sex, sexual orientation, gender, and the list goes on. There seems to be a divide in the Muslim community between those who wish to control this diversity, like the Orthodoxy, and those who wish to see it naturally unfolding and not being threatened by its enormity and its possibilities. The latter is what we call queer, because it goes against the mainstream Orthodox Islamic thinking. Now I know that queer might not be a term most people want to use or even understand or is comfortable using because of its negative connotations. However, I am using queer in this khutbah to mean that which is at odds with the normal, or with the legitimate, or with the dominant. So here queer just has nothing to do with gayness. It is everything that goes against the mainstream orthodoxy. So hence any theological criticism that challenges this mainstream framework of Islamic theology or ideology qualifies as queer. Orthodox Islam is frightened of inquiry or to entertain change, as the residing belief is that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was the perfect example, and we need to mimic him in every way in our lifestyle. So anything that is added to the faith or taken away is innovation, and every innovation, according to Orthodox Islam, leads to the hellfire. In fact, many Quranic verses and hadith is used to warn those who dare to think or question beyond the mainstream Islamic theology. So the Orthodox is trying to control this kind of questioning and inquiry for fear that people might become disbelievers. If we turn to hadith, there's a hadith narrated by Ali radiallahu anhu, who narrated that the Prophet Muhammad said, if anyone makes an innovation or accommodates an innovator, the curse of Allah, the angels, and all persons, I don't know who these people include, but all the persons, the hadith says, the curse will fall upon him. And Allah will not accept any obligatory or supererogatory, I always struggle with that word, acts as recompense for them. So you're basically doomed if you even create anything or even think about anything new in Islam. So this kind of thinking is not unique to the Muslim community. In fact, some Christian denominations have done the same as a way to control the minds of the masses. In South Africa, we come from a history where Christian whites used the Bible to justify apartheid and to justify their superiority over others. It was a way to control the thinking minds of the masses. Now, because of such verses and hadith and the interpretations, many Muslims, much to the denial of the Muslim community, have left practicing Islam. They have only remained Muslim in belief and name. They felt trapped in the system that does not allow them the space to question or to even seek their own path towards Allah. Islam was no longer suggesting something of peace to them, but rather a religion that is stuck in a 7th century Arabian reality and does not leave much room for individuality of intellect in a contemporary context. So when someone starts to think for themselves, they are branded as kafir or murtad, out of the fold of Islam, and can even be killed in some Islamic countries for doing so. The Muslim community recognizes human rights, but does not recognize the human rights of gay people, for example, or even of women, as having social rights that is equal to men. This is even stated so, in not so many words, in the Cairo Islamic Declaration of Human Rights. So what is queer theology? Queer theology is liberation theology. That is assertive, it's inquiring, it's nurturing the individual's own yearning for answers. So basically, something that the mainstream Islamic theology does not offer. Queer theology is not gay theology. The struggle of the gay and lesbian community to find acceptance is part of queer theology. More reason to believe that queer theology is not gay theology is when we look at our annual international retreat, for example. The initiative was to create a safe space for people who identify as queer or as gay. But lately we've seen that straight people have found that space as a safe space for them as well. So the issue was not about being queer or being gay, but the issue was about providing a safe space other than the space that the orthodoxy has provided, that doesn't allow for questioning or that doesn't allow for individual expression. When Salma radiallahu anha, the wife of the Prophet, challenged the Prophet one day, and she questioned him and she asked, why does Allah not speak to women? Or why does Allah not speak to women about women? Why is it always via the men? And then Allah revealed in Surah 33 verse 35, for Muslim men and women, for believing men and women, for devout men and women, for true men and women, for men and women who are patient and constant, for men and women who humble themselves, for men and women who give in charity, for men and women who fast and deny themselves, for men and women who guard their chastity, and for men and women who engage much in the praise of Allah. For them all has Allah prepared forgiveness and a great reward. So what Salma radiallahu anha did was to contest the normalcy and the legitimacy of the male-dominated theology. She contested that. And so what Salma did was queer theology in practice. And it was nothing but standing up and verbalizing that which does not feel authentic to us. I am of the opinion that Orthodox Islam will never accept homosexuality unless they are willing to break away from a theology that enslaves them and willing to explore new understandings of theology. So by accepting homosexuality, they will have to question the whole Orthodox Islamic theological structure. And that is asking a bit too much of the orthodoxy. The patriots on the other side of this queer theology are liberal Muslims, progressive thinking Muslims, feminists who oppose a male-dominated Islamic theology, and converts to Islam who are untainted by the baggage of an Islamic cultural upbringing. Queer theology leads to authenticity. Human beings must develop the curiosity and the ability to face and question the unknown. Because it is through engaging and questioning and accepting the difference that comes with that engagement that leads to our authentic living. Often the Quran makes mention of this by repeatedly asking in different verses, أَفَلَا تُبْصِرُونَ, don't you see? أَفَلَا تَتَفَكَّرُونَ, don't you reflect? أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ, don't you use your intellect? So when Allah says in the first verse that I quoted, إِلَّا بِالدِّينِ وَالتَّقْوَى, that there is no distinction between humans except on levels of God consciousness or Allah consciousness. Allah makes no distinction in her creation in any of its diverse forms. But the only distinction that Allah makes is by righteous conduct and by Allah consciousness. So hence any person with his or her multiple identities, including gender and sexual identities, rich or poor, are no better than the other except in Allah consciousness. Muslim traditionalists and fundamentalists, and certainly some Christian fundamentalists, thrive on homogeneity, things to be one, because the best way to control a people is to get them to think alike and to remove from them the right to think differently. I recall from my early Islamic studies in a Salafi school how teachers sometimes used to boil, their blood used to boil when students used to ask questions that were very challenging, because it goes against the ideological thinking that they were trying to impart on students. Theology is supposed to inspire change. Spirituality is a beautifully complex phenomenon that cannot be grasped if the individual is not open to a revolutionary new way of thinking about Allah. Today there are many groups such as the Muslim feminists, progressive Muslims, Quranians, and so on, who are rejected by the mainstream for their queerness. This is not new to the Islamic world. Even during the golden age of Islam, which was the first 2 centuries of Islam, there were many different groups of Muslims who did not always agree with the other on very fundamental issues of faith, and who also did not make it to be included in this mainstream of Islam. The concept of Allah in Islam is a good example. Most Muslims will tell you that Allah has no gender, He is neither male, He is neither female, and He does not have parents, and He does not have sons and daughters. But yet this very God is spoken about in male terms. Allah is referred to as He. Allah's male qualities is often emphasized, such as power, punishment, the judge, God's anger. And Allah's female qualities is always understated, such as Allah being the Allah of love, His care and His mercy. Muslims who have issue with this kind of description of Allah, that Allah is male and harsh, is queer in their thinking. Women leading prayers and delivering khutbahs are becoming common, arguing that this is not a strange phenomenon, especially not in the golden era of Islam. This is queer theology in practice, and it flies in the face of patriarchal Islam. It heavily challenges the patriarchal mind. Another example. For example, what we've done in this organization, and so many other groups have done, we have taken the masjid out of the masjid, where the masjid is supposed to be a safe space, and for many has become an unsafe space. That in itself is queer theology in practice. And people who still go to mosques, many people, and did not get this opportunity to challenge their own reasons for going to mosque, still go because Allah says they have to, the Quran says they have to, and they do not want to be punished, avoiding punishment. And if they don't go, they experience the guilt. That in itself is inauthentic. There are many interpretations of the Quran. This is indeed a blessing. It's not necessarily a bad thing. But we need to strive towards an interpretation of the Quran that speaks to the liberation of people. The Quran wasn't sent down to enslave people, but to liberate them. An interpretation that does the opposite cannot possibly be from Allah. Even saying this is queer theology, because according to Orthodox Muslims, there can only be one interpretation of the Quran. We need not look further than our own communities to see the hypocrisy in Islamic practices, clearly indicating that Muslims have lost their understanding of their own faith and have just become blind followers. Barakallahu li wa lakum fil Quran. We often speak of Allah's unity and how Allah created diversity in everything, in stark contrast to the oneness of Allah. We say on the one hand Allah is one, but on the other hand Allah created everything that has pairs or in contrasting view, and a vast ocean of diversity. And it is through this diversity that Allah wants Allah's oneness to be celebrated. So any partnership or relationship that is based on love is beautiful. Whether it is with a human being to a human being, whether it's a human being to an animal, or a human being to, or a human being to environment, or a human being towards Allah. These are all, if it's established on love relationships, it's beautiful. And this kind of relationships, it has at its core love, because Allah is the source of love. In fact, Allah is love Himself or herself. Orthodox Islamic theology focuses on what is halal versus what is haram, and passes fatwas on a daily basis that makes the lives of most Muslims so unbearable. Queer theology focuses on Allah having created ease and not difficulty, and that Allah's mercy supersedes His anger, and that life is sacred, and that forgiveness is loved by Allah. This is queer theology. Queer Muslims are more and more realizing and being liberated from the belief that from the belief that is enforced upon them, that they are their sexuality. Queer Muslims are slowly coming to understand that sexuality is really just an aspect of their being. Queer theology has helped queer Muslims to come to this realization. Queer theology expands our knowledge of Allah, knowledge of the unknown, and it also allows us the ability to explore ourselves so that we can bring ourselves in alignment to the forces of the universe. In my almost 17 years experience in working with queer Muslims, or with queer Muslim issues, I came to discover that queer Muslims, those who have made the effort and who have made the effort and were prepared to do the inner work, have found their spirituality enriched by embracing their sexuality. And with this love making between spirituality and sexuality, and marrying the divine with the erotic, the need to engage in casual and empty sex diminish. Because when you deny your sexuality, you're denying a part of yourself. But when you embrace it as you would embrace your spirituality, you find wholeness and completeness. And this happens as a result of queer theology. Orthodox Islam, even though they may deny it, does not give permission for sexual expression. Even sex and sex play within a legitimate relationship is restricted. A lot of emphasis is placed on how far you could go as opposed to how far you should go to ensure that your partner is sexually fulfilled. Queer theology seeks to give expression to sexuality and not to treat it as something that needs to be downplayed in order for spirituality to develop. In fact, spirituality cannot develop if you deny such an important aspect of yourself as sexuality. In queer theology, both sexuality and spirituality are aspects of human growth, and the one holds as much energy and importance as the other. Orthodox Islam uses fear and guilt-tripping to control the masses. They take responsibility not only for the public, but also for the private domain, taking away from the individual the ability to reason and to decide for themselves what is right and what is wrong. Queer theology teaches responsibility of the self. So how does orthodoxy deal with those who step out of line? It's often through cursing the sinners, harsh punishments such as lashing, cutting off limbs, and even stoning to death in public, so that it becomes a lesson for those who are thinking of doing the same. Queer theology, on the other hand, teaches that Allah is oft forgiving, most merciful, and that individuals who make up a society needs to be conscientized and helped along rather than being eliminated. Allahumma salli ala